What's up, everybody? Welcome to the De-Occulting Yoga Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Katnack. The De-Occulting Yoga Podcast covers yoga consciousness, yoga philosophy, mind control in yoga, natural law, truth and the hyper-real in yoga, the occult, cults inside yoga and how they are formed, plus any other issues that affect the yoga community. Legitimate solutions will be offered to the lies we are told in the New Age movement and in yoga that disintegrate truth, morals, and positive contribution to the world. So, okay, people, today we're going to get into the deepest stuff I've ever released in public about postmodernism and the hyperreal in yoga and how that's relevant, because yoga is the perfect example. I've been studying postmodernism in university and by myself for probably about 5 years pretty seriously, and just the other day I started applying it to yoga and started looking around the web and it didn't show up, and I was like, whoa, this is nuts. Yoga is such a great example of the transition and the positive and negative. So let's first define modern and postmodern. So modern is, when we have a master narrative of progress through science and technology, the history, everything's laid out. We have a sense of individualism, capitalism, the unified self. And then the general idea of the family, right? The core unit, the middle class model. So postmodernism, which started coming around in the 60s and 70s, kind of blew that up in a sense and reversed the values and built on a whole new system with, the skepticism of progress, with an anti-technological view and the invention of more new age religions. And the sense of a fragmented self, of multiple personalities, and we're not just this individual who's doing these things, and kind of like the yogic, we are all one consciousness. Plus, alternative views of the family, such as, gay marriage or communes and things like that. And that's just kind of like the basic definition. We'll get into a little that more later. So if you still are a little unclear, just look up, the basic definition of modern and postmodern right now before we move on, because I won't really explain it anymore. So when we get into yoga, it's very funny story. It's such a funny story that basically we've been told a lie, at least in this modern sense, that there's a man named Krishnacharya who was who was the teacher of Iyengar, Pattabhi Jois, and Desikachar, which makes up a lot of the yoga world, and people wondered where he got all these poses from and how he invented his yoga system. And he said that he got some of it from some old Hatha yoga texts, but the rest he said he invented or he got from this other teacher master who lived in a cave for months at a time, which has also been proven to be BS. But it's been proven, I'll just say proven, at the highest level possible, that he just stole all these poses from Western gymnastics, kind of made some hybrids. But he claimed that he got them all from this leaf text that had been eaten by ants, and just total BS. And there's the perpetrators of this lie out there, such as a great blogger named Grimley. Go check out his page, Grimley Hall or something. A lot of great yogic information in the worst layout of website possible. I get lost in that website and I'll just go on for hours. I have no idea what's going on in there. But he plays this whole Krishnacharya meta-narrative. And I'd like to say and contest that our modern yoga is a fiction now. Or yoga today is a fiction. And the modern discourses that have been created since then have created that fact. Even Pattabhi Jois and Iyengar kept pushing this lie, right? And everything else, because yoga, the research into yoga like I'm doing right now, will result in this disintegration of yoga's history and of the topic of yoga and everything that we've been presented. Just as looking into Christianity deeper and deeper brought us to science, which disintegrated Christianity, and a bunch of other things. Just as looking deeper and deeper into coding got rid of other, the old Macintosh computers. So eventually the research into yoga is going to disintegrate these things. So our modern discourses invented after the event that actually, was the creation of yoga, are what we think of yoga as now. And this is this is problematic, and especially the way we look at it today, that this is a truth, or that no one's even like openly contesting this. And this stems from what is called a logocentric view, which yoga is very into. It's very weird that it's more of a Western type of thinking, but Easterners and do it so much with their system of the gurus. So what logocentrism is that speech is placed at the highest level of language and at the chain. So usually, in a logocentric view, it goes thought comes, right? We have a thought, and then we speak it. And then eventually it can get down into writing and other forms of communication. But they hold speech on the highest form of communication pedestal, that it's the most natural thing, that there's always a form of meaning to language, right? What's happening right now, there's a meaning to what I'm saying to you. But so when you have a logocentric view, then when you move down into writing is like a grossification of that. And gurus we always hear that, you know text, you don't read text, you don't do the pranayama, you must learn from me. I know the pranayama secrets, my mounts. We hear that, right? And writing then becomes this weird level with them, because when we have this view that speaking and the master is the idol, is the symbol is on a higher priority, then suddenly the writing has a good and a bad dialectic, right? Two sides. That there's a good side and then there's a bad side. So if we look at Pattabhi Jois's Ashtanga Vinyasa system, there's a good and a bad side to my interpretation and how I do it. If I go to a Mysore class and I'm like just doing something kind of random and like going with it and being creative, to everyone's viewpoint, that's going to be bad, because everyone's self-referential point is Pattabhi Jois, correct? So, and what he said and what he says right, or Sharat Jois and the lineage, or Manju. And if I come in, I'm doing something else, and I'm saying like, yeah, this is Ashtanga yoga, people are gonna be like, you're crazy, bro. But that's because they're in this logocentric mindset where they place the speech of their master or guru on this pedestal, and now there's a good and a bad. This mindset is total BS, mostly, right? That there's this good and unnatural side, because that gets into a lot deeper elements too outside of yoga, but these are the things that hold us back. And there's been a form of transcendence, in my opinion, in the wrong way, which I'll get to later, in things like social media and all these other things that people have like just not even cared what's good and what's bad. They're just like, I don't care, I'm just going to do me. And that's all good, but the problem is that we're playing by their rules still when we enter into this game with them. And I think the best thing we can do for ourselves and yoga, and the most positive side of a postmodern outlook on yoga, is that we remove the meta narratives of yoga, of this linear viewpoint. Like, okay, there was the Hatha Yoga text, and then we went like this and that, and then Krishnamacharya got it, and then Pattabhi Jois got it, and then Tim Miller got it, and now I have it, and there's this. And when we put it in this logocentrism, and then there's this good and bad free play, because the endeavor to know how and what extent it might be possible to think different, we need to think differently instead of legitimizing what is already known, right? When we sit here and we play in their rules and we enter that logocentric game of, even when we do a vinyasa flow, we're legitimizing what they were doing. But is it possible? And yes, it is possible, everybody. Yes, it is possible not to enter their game and to be totally outside of that meta-narrative. I know that might be a lot to handle, that we don't need to do this and that. yoga is not definable in these terms because there's going to be so much backlash already. Click the pause button now. I'm not even on the good stuff yet, and people are already like, don't go there. You guys know that this has a lot of relevance to what's going on right now. I see, like, people will be like, no, you have to get, like, well, think about, like, Ashtanga Vinyasa system. It's like you do this pose, and 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 this pose. And every time, even if we enter and we do different things, or, like, we mess with it, and we have a different way of, like, getting that pose, or a teacher lets us get the next pose, we're already legitimizing what has already happened, which is, like I said, was a lie in the first place. And I practice Ashtanga yoga, great system. But when I give it that power and I don't think differently and I don't mess around outside of that, and even when I'm doing it, I don't give it, and anytime I do it and give energy to that meta narrative, then I'm at a fault. I'm wasting energy. I'm playing into a lie. But when let me get something. When I put it inside, when I like write it down, or I like start taking it over in my mind, or like in the body, and I start moving around in the asanas, I do not arrange the signification of those moves within natural limits, but form a chain of signification that radiates in all directions. Let me repeat that. I do not form movements or signifiers that arrange themselves within natural limits. But I form chains of signification or movements that radiate in all directions. So I'm not when we place things outside of that realm, and now suddenly we're writing it down and we're free playing, or we're like moving and like flowing and without anything in our mind, we're now past the natural limits of that good and that bad, that dialectic they put us in. Now we're outside of logocentrism, and it can go anywhere we want, right? And there's nothing, as Derrida, Jacques, whatever his name is, the postmodern philosopher, like the king of deconstruction, said, quote, "There is nothing outside of the text." And I'll change that and say, there's nothing outside of yoga and the free flow of movement. That is it. Everything else is like a lie they're putting in our head. It's a energy vampire. Like anytime I'm doing this, or I'm doing like my flow, and I'm thinking, wow, Patabi Joyce wouldn't approve of this. Even if I'm doing a system and I'm like, maybe in Padagustasana, I changed the hand placement. I put the hand, but as soon as, and I'm like, oh, this feels great. My hamstring kind of hurts. But as soon as I am thinking about that my energy is going somewhere else. But there really isn't anything outside of what I'm doing and what I'm making significant. Correct? And we're hitting this level in yoga where we're playing off of this narrative that, like I said, wasn't real in the first place, and it starts creating these meta narratives tenfold to levels and numbers that are impossible to even fathom. So last week I quoted Soren Kierkegaard about the truth and what can be known. So I'd like to continue with Kierkegaard. So, quote, "Modern society is a network of relations in which individuals are leveled into an abstract phantom known as the public. They can never be actually united in an actual situation or organization." Last week I touched upon that, how in yoga there's actually no real organization. There's no push towards certain things. There's no system of values. There's no, like, we're going to go and do this, and this is like what we stand for. That's kind of all been disheveled because we've been plotted into this large pool and these large groups that really encompass all of yoga, instead of, and even though there's different schools like Ashtanga and all this, in the larger sense, we don't tell people that. We don't say like, hey, I do. People don't understand what we mean, but when we just say yoga, people kind of understand. But why doesn't the word yoga as an organization or as a movement or situation have a purpose other than, I guess, teaching people self-liberation techniques, but as a political or sociological, etc. type of system? And that's because we're getting lost in the bad parts of postmodernism, right? Like I said, we start making symbols, correct? Such as I'm just going to once again go here. Patabi Joyce. If you go to a modern Mysore studio, somewhere in the room there's going to be this photo of Patabi Joyce. And we're suddenly in this logocentric view. Like, lo and behold, there's a photo here, and like what he said, there's a good and a bad. Like, what is right and what is wrong is already established in a photo form. And with the proliferation of social media and other things, this is like just gone haywire with what is this supposed to be. And so, for example, recently, this has been probably the biggest news in the yoga community, which is news is pretty hard to get, right? Is that Keto McGregor and her friend Beach Yoga girl Carrie, I think, very nice people, created Om Stars Yoga, which is a online subscription-based yoga class network, correct? And everyone now has to contend with that. If I want to, which I may one day want to create, and I already do yoga classes online, so we'll just say I actually am in this right now. Instead of, and I'm trying to escape this, is that instead of looking to the real nature of my body and how I feel and what I think yoga is, in terms of like connection to my intuition and the universe and nature, like looking at animals like and plants and how they look, such as yoga, we do all these animal poses, correct? Like down dog, up dog, camel pose, right? Instead of looking at that, we're fighting against these imaginary systems that are being created, such as Patabi Joyce's system, or Omastar's yoga, or Dylan Werner's yoga. All of these people, we're fighting instead of doing what we want. I see a lot of people put their energy into like going against something or trying to one up them, but now they're playing their rules. Now they're playing in their logocentric mindset, and they're not accepting the validity of themselves and what their movements or their texts can create. We are now organized around simulation, around images, photos, and signs. Those now form the rules of yoga. We perceive ourselves by the identities we create to relate to others. Our whole economy, politics, social life, and culture in yoga are all governed by this simulation. Now I have to create this identity. Maybe you've seen some of my videos, and I feel a little uncomfortable about this, like calling myself the revolutionary yogi. And I still like that, and I have a website called savvyzen.com, and I'm creating this identity, correct? So I can relate to others in the images, photos, and signs out there. And that's a little crazy, right? That I have taken into account the images, photos, and signs in yoga and created this marketable slogan or whatever you want to call it, in my view. And then that identity is Savvy Zen, is, the savvy kids of yoga, which we are. Here I am wearing, this nice ink splotted art t-shirt and talking about postmodernism, right? Whoa. I am relating now with that. We are imploding what yoga really meant. Look at the world of yoga literature and the proliferation of sexuality in yoga now. That is totally not what yoga was 100 years ago. And I'm not saying this is, but maybe I'll talk about a little bit in a minute or two, what's good and what's bad in my opinion. But the sexuality of yoga is just a given. Like when the system implodes and the modern view of yoga, like just look at yoga, just like social media yoga. It's just bikinis and this and that, and like butt shots, like people just trying to finagle, you know, finagle any way they can to get, you know, a following through their image and through the sexuality of their situation. And then yoga literature, it's getting crazy. Like all these yoga books, like and then I'll be writing some too, like paleo diet for yoga or personal development for yoga, whatever I end up writing, right? And you know, one I saw the other day is by this chick who's like, your body, your yoga. And this chick is a larger chick. She has a huge following on Instagram, and it's basically she's running with the ploy that I can do yoga, so you can do yoga too. And that's beautiful. But in the context of the old definition of yoga, that is totally like when I saw that and I thought of like yoga and I was like, whoa, this is mind blowing. Like, we've come so far. There's good and bad elements to that, and I think the your body, your yoga stuff is actually pretty cool because people can, who like have sat too much or have whatever problems, can like approach yoga and do yoga, and there's someone out there who has great information. I followed, can't remember her name on there, but I've looked at her Instagram for a long time, and I definitely would trust her with this type of information. Anyway, the state of yoga in its theory is melting, correct? And we've entered now into the hyper-real. Social media, information, and communication provide experiences more intense than the existence of banal, everyday yoga and modern life. Plus more intense experiences around the old structures built around yoga, right, in our day-to-day life. The hyper-real at some point replaces the real and changes its structure and starts to control us, right? We, at one point, start looking at the simulacra. The simulacra is a copy of a copy, right? So, at some point, this mindset or this social media, this information, a social media photo isn't real, right? That was a copy of a copy, correct? But then we make a simulacra of the simulacra. We make a copy of the copy of the copy. And that's why I'm really fasting from social media right now and not looking at anything and trying to figure all that out. Because when I look at a photo, my interpretation of yoga and everything else gets shifted now. Because the photos are logocentric also. I suddenly make a good and a bad, like what do I need to do? What do I think's right and what do I think's wrong? Suddenly that becomes into play. And I'm basing my reality and my experiences and my future actions off of a copy's copy, correct? And that's what yoga's turned into. That's what everyone's doing. Everyone's on social media and looking at these things. And suddenly that's the hyper real. Suddenly we're at the third level of existence, and suddenly everything implodes because the real has been totally forgotten. Like what was that first layer is totally screwed up. And then if that person who gave us that first layer is influenced by all these things also, then we're really in this weird rabbit hole, right? Yogis at this present moment are fleeting from the desert of the real for the ecstasy of hyper reality, such as computers, media, and technological experiences. I'll say that again. Yogis are fleeting or fleeting from the desert of the real for the ecstasy of the hyper real. Think about it. Just look at like popular people on Instagram or in yoga and like what their basis is and what modern yoga is turning into with loud pumping techno music and anything that isn't the old definition of yoga, which is very right. And I love that definition of yoga. You may think that right now that I'm trying to disabandon yoga, but when I sit here and I do my flowing, free flow, non-logocentric stuff, I almost always am doing something that looks like the old definition of yoga because it's amazing. That's something I think I need to like enunciate right now, that they knew what they were doing, right? Like that's why this is so great. And I'm not saying we need the revolution in yoga where everyone's doing nude yoga and lives in communes and does headstands for 5 hours a day. Like no. But through experimentation, we eventually see that they did have a lot of things right, but they put a hold on the creativity, and that's where I think yoga went wrong, and that's why there's been this mega resistance. And yoga's kind of trending with like modern society, and they're rebelling against Christianity and all that. And we need to get out of that dialectic because, yeah, Christianity sucks. Like just that whole mindset. Like the morals are great and all that, but overall, like yes, but we don't need to like just when we okay, here we go. When we are in this dialectic of Christianity or not Christianity, we're still giving power to Christianity, correct? But it's a logocentrism again. But when we reduce down to not thinking of what's yoga or modern yoga, but we just assimilate information and clear the mind through meditation and great things, and that's what yoga is so good for, everybody, is that we can like really clear ourselves and then create and see what's beautiful. Okay, now I'm going to quote first Jean Baudrillard. I think that's how you say it. See, he says at some point we become a pure screen, a pure absorption and reabsorption surface of the influential networks, right? And then quoting Douglas Kernel on this. In other words, an individual in a postmodern world becomes merely an entity influenced by the media, technological experience, and the hyper-real. Right? It's deep, everybody. We're going deep. I told you. Correct? We're not messing around here today. They become a pure screen, a pure absorption, and a pure reabsorption surface of influent networks. Because going back to Marshall McLuhan, great Canadian philosopher, sociologist, he says that when we watch TV, we're not watching, the TV isn't a screen, we're the screen. I don't know if you've ever heard this concept before, is that TV is giving us information, but we can never tell the TV anything else. Like right now, you're watching me on the screen, woo, but you can't respond. Yes, you can comment and do these other things, but you can't technically say anything right now. You are a screen to this message right now, correct? And when we enter this hyper-real world by meeting and everything else, suddenly we're not just a screen. Like right now you are a screen. But if you take this and you like run with it and you take everything else in yoga and your whole life is based on things that aren't of nature and aren't of whatever the real world is, then you're a pure screen. Then you literally have no way to respond other than what has been put in your head. You have no creativity. You're in that logocentric viewpoint, correct? So moving on. So quoting Baudrillard again, the narcoticized and mesmerized, media-saturated consciousness is in such a state of fascination with image and spectacle that the concept of meaning itself dissolves. As simulations proliferate, they come to only refer only to themselves, a carnival of mirrors reflecting images projected from other mirrors onto the omnipresent television and computer screen and the screen of consciousness, which in turn refers the image to its previous storehouse of images also produced by simulatory images. Caught up in the universe of simulations, the masses are bathed in a medium massage, without messages or meaning, a mass age where classes disappear and politics is dead, as are the grand dreams of disalienation, liberation, and revolution. Henceforth, the masses seek spectacle and not meaning. They implode into a silent majority signifying the end of social. So that's a lot to break down. So we'll take that slowly, right? And this is kind of like the end point here. It's such a state of fascination with image and spectacle that the concept of meaning itself dissolves. So the meaning of, let's say, back to a modern viewpoint of the family, eventually when enough people, we talk about gay marriage, enough people get raised that way, and there's communes, and there's a whole different way, the meaning of like the middle class family dissolves, right? That's just like an easy concept to think about. But when we'll talk about the yamas and niyamas, the first two limbs of yoga, when we're in such fascination with the image and the spectacle and what they're doing and what they're saying, suddenly the true meaning of Patanjali's and other great philosophers, yamas and niyamas, dissolves. And as these, quote, as these simulations proliferate, they only come to refer only to themselves. So suddenly, people out there only start referring to these, social media persons or these new interpretations, simulations, right? They don't even know about Patanjali or all that. And they just keep referring back to themselves. So then they create something and someone else does it, and it goes down this chain. But from the start, it was all a simulacrum, correct? And it is a carnival of mirrors reflecting images projected from other mirrors onto the omnipresent television. So let me rephrase that. A carnival of yoga philosophy reflecting their ways from other philosophies onto social media, our classrooms, and the screen of consciousness, which in turn refers the image to its previous storehouse of images also produced by simulatory mirrors. And that's getting back into Krishnamacharya and the lie that he told us, right? That eventually, after all the simulation, people are going to try and find the real, right? People are like, I'm going to go search for the real, right? And they're going to go back to the start of the lie, right? At the end of all this, everyone's going to go back to that lie, and they're going to get there, and they're still haven't gone anywhere because there wasn't anything genuine or authentic about that, though. What Krishnamacharya was doing was very plotted out so that he could go to Mysore Palace and do these things and continue the caste system, right, of yoga, where the poor people don't get it, but the rich people get it. That's for another video, though. Caught up in the universe of simulations, the masses are bathed in a media massage without messages or meaning, a massage where classes disappear and politics is dead, as are the grand dreams of disalienation, liberation, and revolution. So when we're getting bathed by social media and all this stuff, without any meaning, without any message of this liberation, of revolution, of actually making a social or political movement or statement in one direction, correct? Then the classes disappear. The politics is dead. And this is so foretelling of what's going on in yoga. And they implode into a silent majority, signifying the end of the social. And that's what happens, right? That's what happened right now with social media. Suddenly it's the end of the social. Everyone's silent now. Everyone in yoga actually has no voice of where yoga is going to go and what it's going to do and how the actual definition of yoga is going to evolve, because that doesn't matter anymore. Now it's the definition of the simulacra that matters, correct? So people like Grimley, like who I talked about at the start, who is really trying to do a service to yoga, go read his blog again, he's getting lost. And he is now, the silent majority is giving him nothing. Eventually one day Grimley's going to be gone, and that silent, the revolution he's trying to start and the liberation he's trying to start, even though it may be from Krishnamacharya's lie, but that's way closer to what yoga is than what we're at now. And there's going to be no one to continue that pretty soon, unfortunately. So there is good and bad parts of postmodernism. I would say the good parts encompass that creative free play of not putting ourselves into this good and bad Hegelian dialectic, correct? And that's something that people in yoga really need to learn. Right now, I'm trying to get off social media. I basically am. There's no personal profiles left. I have the Savvy Zen Facebook page and the Savvy Zen Instagram page now. And no, I'm not following anyone on Instagram, and on Facebook I don't have to look at anything because I'm using a program that just sends things right in there, so I don't even have to log in. I don't even have an account. My sister's account's the one who links to that. Savvy Zen. Because for the present moment, I'm not trying to get into that game, right? I'm not trying to like see these things and lose what I think my definition, and not my definition, but the beginnings and origins of yoga, which, like I said, is most likely a meta narrative, which is most likely not true. So now it's just time for myself, and what I'm trying to do to move and, like I said, observe nature and my intuition and learn from some other great teachers and plug that into a system that doesn't give them any power and see what I get out. Maybe that version isn't great. Maybe no one's going to like that version. But eventually, if enough people do that, we're going to come up with something amazing. But if we keep going down this rabbit hole of self-referentiality and the hyperreal and simulacra and the dissolving of meaning, we're going to end up in solipsism, which I talked about last week, which is the most dangerous and crazy lie in the world of yoga. We don't want to end up there. And the way out is almost like the way in, which is almost getting into weird solipsism, where you're not like caring about anything, but then at the end you're doing that so that you can find meaning. So I'll conclude with that. This has been a dense podcast. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I just had to put this out into the world about subjective reality and what's kind of going on in terms of yoga and its implosion. So don't take this wrong. Don't think I'm trying to diss on Grimley or any of these other people or social media people. We need to somehow get this message across to them or become the new message without playing into the simulacra so that we can save yoga, right? If not, it's going to turn into a mess. It's already looking bad. If you are not happy with the state of yoga, this is going to get a million times worse. There's going to be nude yoga shows. There's going to be weird stuff. Like, I'll just say it out loud. This isn't going anywhere good. And it's up to us individually to save that. We need organization. We need a political sphere. Everything. Politics and yoga does align. I'll talk about that at another time. But we need to stop playing these games, everybody. So, this is Ian from Savvy Zen. This is the De-Occulting podcast. There'll be another one next week. Thank you for sticking through this with me. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.